Hello, welcome to the 21st Century Barn Raising. I want to introduce myself. My name is Maya Sharfi. I'm principal of design research firm Creative Agency. I work with the Enterprise Rose Fellowship, which you're going to hear about in just a few minutes, and I'm going to be moderating the discussion. I want to point out that you should have a Q&A box and a chat box on your screen. So if at any point during this conversation you have questions that you want to put to our panelists, or you have comments that you want to make, feel free to use those so that you can communicate with us. It'd also be helpful if somebody out there can type in the chat box right now and make sure that you can see me, you can hear me, and you can see the screen that says the 21st Century Barn Raising. So today you're going to hear a discussion of two very different projects that have something to teach us about community development today. One of these projects is urban and one is rural, but they both have a key lesson to teach us about how socially sustainable projects are initiated and delivered. This conversation is based on two case studies written on two projects that are based in Minnesota in very different locales and of very different scales. You can find out more about these projects at the link that you can see on your screen. So I'm going to introduce two people to you today. So James and Stephen, I'm going to unmute you right now. So
Thank you,
James is an architect at the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership. Oh, good. There you are. Hey there.
Here I am. Good morning. Thank you.
The Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership is a community development corporation based in Slayton, Minnesota. SWMHP serves 27 counties in southern and west central Minnesota with additional projects in northwest Iowa. James works to incorporate comprehensive design practices into SWMHP's pre-development process, and he works with the organization to maximize its impacts on resident health, community space, and energy efficiency. Stephen Klimek is the Senior Project Manager at the Towerside Innovation District. Towerside is an eco-district that coordinates property owners to raise the bar on what they can do for the community by developing shared resources like integrated stormwater management and district-scale energy that cuts across property lines. The project is attracting partners such as municipal agencies and philanthropic funders. Stephen and James are also former Rose Fellows. They just graduated, so we should congratulate them. They are part of Enterprise Community Partners program, the Rose Fellowship, which places architectural designers in community development organizations across the country so that they can integrate design excellence into their organizations. And oftentimes they facilitate an inclusive approach to creating green, sustainable, and affordable communities. If you're interested in finding out more about this program, you can go to Enterprise Community Partners website at enterprisecommunity.org. So Stephen and James are both based in Minnesota. They were based there during their fellowship and they've continued on. And one of the things that happened over the course of their fellowship is that they found they were working on two projects that were seemingly very different, but included a similar approach to how community engagement and much larger goals were accomplished in the projects themselves. So I want to start by having each of them fill you in a little bit on what their projects are. You can find out more, like I said, in the case studies, and where they were when they started the project and what their projects were meant to accomplish. So let's start with James. James, take us back a couple of years and tell us where you were when you were first starting the Rock County Historical Museum project.
Happy to do that. We're going back to 2015. Early summer 2015, I was active Rose Fellow at the partnership at the time. We got a call from the Rock County Historical Society about this project that they wanted to do. It was really just a call that we did not expect. They were interested in our perspective on evaluating the costs that they were seeing to renovate an old dealership into what has become the Historical Society's History Center. And we were happy to go meet with them, and we did that. In fact, I remember the moment I was standing in the middle of what was a actively changing mechanic shop at the time, quite dirty from decades of use. And this was the space that they were looking to renovate into their new facility to serve their community. And there was the immediate need of looking at the costs that they were seeing for this project that they had already started, but were trying to get a handle on. But the big takeaway from that moment, that initial meeting for me, was recognition of their passion and interest in this vision of creating a history center for their community. The Historical Society is an 80-year-old, longstanding organization that really believes in their mission of providing a resource for the future that is about their past. And they just had a strong vision to move forward with. And that is something that just roots in and you take note of in any meeting like this. And it just built from there.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, take us forward a little bit in time. How did you start the project? And if you can give us a little bit of a timeline
Sure.
of how you got from there to what you have today.
Right. Well, what happened next was we took what they gave us and their questions, we took them back to our office and started evaluating everything that we had learned, and took a hard look at their facility and what they could do, what the likely costs were, how design played into that, and engaged our own construction resource to evaluate the cost and the potential in this hope, this vision of theirs, and came down to a sense that it could be done for less than maybe they were anticipating. And we proposed to them to actually work as a collaborative team, contractor, designer, architect, and them as the owner, that we would share this responsibility of carrying forward their vision and creating the History Center. So there was an early commitment on the part of the group involving them and us in a design build capacity to actually carry this project forward. It was a truly unique, community integrated, collaborative process, unlike any that I've been involved with prior.
Yeah. Well, what made it so different from other projects you'd been involved with?
Deep roots into the community. Primarily, it starts with the Historical Society's history there. They're a well-respected organization. People know who they are, and they know the community that they're a part of. But it was also unique in terms of combining design and construction essentially under one umbrella with them. We were all actively working through the process of design and build simultaneously from start to finish, which was unique. And it caused us to really engage the community in very personal ways, like active participation with local contractors, local resources, individuals at the city level, at the local newspaper. The county was involved. It really spread out all over town and beyond into the county, Rock County itself. And you get to know a lot of people at a very personal level, and you learn quickly how important this type of project is to them.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so Stephen, I want to ask you about James's project.
Sure.
Because the two of you talked a lot about your projects. You swapped ideas about what this all meant. So what do you think is one of the most innovative aspects of James's project?
I thought you were going to ask that. And there's so many interesting little pieces of the entire process that they went through. I mean, even as a historical society, deciding to use a design build process and leveraging those resources, leveraging the kind of unknown opportunities that could come up, and being open to that, being open to what happens and evolving as they went. And that happened in the design and construction of the project. It happened in the funding of the project and how it actually was paid for through kind of snowballed contributions and grants. And the culture that they used, or I think that kind of got created by them working together, and that social aspect was really always very impressive. And I think it's some of the parallels we found.
Yeah, James, just back to you. Can you tell us, when one of some of these innovative funding mechanisms or things that were maybe different than in a typical project, can you give us an example of one of them?
Well, sure. Maybe one or two really quickly. It really it's grassroots. It starts at ground level, and they were very active in fundraising as an organization, going beyond their own membership to the community, accessing any grants that they thought were potentially viable. They reached out to utilize. So really hats off to them for really taking that issue of cost and funds seriously. There was also, because there was so much energy around this project and they were so active in promoting it, the community locally was definitely engaged, but it also caught the attention of a philanthropist that was interested in doing this type of project in Laverne. And the philanthropist issued a challenge to the community that they would match funds dollar for dollar over a period of time. Whatever was raised by the community, they would contribute their own matching funds. So it was a constructive challenge to the community to get more from what they were already starting to do. And that's just the beginning of the snowball effect that went out across Laverne to help support this project.
Yeah, so it sounds like instead of securing a philanthropic funder, behind closed doors, the philanthropic funder was brought to the project in part because of the excitement that they generated through a very community-oriented process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I know that there's one more aspect of the project that I think is interesting. So you and the Rock County Historical, can you describe the relationship between your organization and the Rock County Historical Organization in terms of some of the things you did to save on construction costs? I know there were some things you kind of hacked the nonprofit structure, hacked it to deal with sales tax differently. I mean, fill us in on some of those details.
We were able to utilize sales tax exemption on construction material purchases. So we were able to utilize that exemption through the Historical Society certified nonprofit status. So as a nonprofit, that is an opportunity for you in doing a capital project like this. We saved, at last check, it was over $20,000, and which is significant to them because we're talking about a project that's about $1 million total construction cost. We termed in the article, if you haven't read it, you can, Goodwill Capital. And that's a unique way of saying, I guess, intimate volunteer support that was truly effective and doing a variety of things that sometimes go perhaps overlooked in a process, but many people were actively helping. And some took on larger tasks. Some elements of the project that were unique, such as some tin ceiling tiles that were reused, they were salvaged from the old building. We turned them into lighting structures and details for the ceiling of the gallery spaces. Those were all created by volunteers. And that would have been thousands of dollars that would have been spent had they not been volunteer created. So thankful for that. And then also there were two local resources, a crew from the local county, which utilizes some community service labor, which was very helpful really from the beginning of the project into like the painting phase. They did a lot of work that helped save money. And then there was another one at the county level, locally in the region. Multiple counties share this resource. They were instrumental in doing a lot of construction tasks that would have been difficult to engage a local contractor to do because they're sometimes small and difficult to get a good price on. So those resources were very helpful in saving money, and the community got to know some people that they don't necessarily know through that interaction. So there was a social dimension to using these lower cost labor resources as well.
Yeah. So, and those are all part of opt-in programs, right?
Yep, they're all, yep.
Yeah.
They are opt-in, as you said.
Right, for the labor themselves. Well, okay, so let's go to Stephen. Stephen, take us back to where you were when you were starting your project, or when you first got involved with the big vision that ended up being Towerside.
Sure. So it was also in 2015. It was the second day of my fellowship.
Okay.
And it entered a room with probably 30 people, and there were half a dozen reports on the table from the last couple of years of this group's visioning and planning and designing. And there were lots of ideas on the table. There's lots of concepts and hopes and dreams. And more or less through my entire 3 years as the fellowship, kind of working half-time on this, supporting these different organizations, working as this public-private partnership, looking at building district-scale infrastructure systems. One big project being a new green street, another being a district stormwater system, which was the first thing we completed, and we're looking to expand right now. A district energy system, integrated utility hubs, kind of looking at all the different ways that we can, as we're building out a large area in both Minneapolis and St. Paul, that's lots of brownfields, has lots of opportunity for large scale development. How do we do that in the best way possible? And we don't have to look backwards and how we used to do things. We can look forwards. That's the idea of the kind of district approach to development and the innovation district that we have here.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, give us a little bit of a catch up. What have you achieved so far?
So it all started when the Green Line light rail connected downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul in 2014. Most of this brownfield industrial land that wasn't attractive for development became pretty hot. It was on transit. And the problem was that in this area, there wasn't any infrastructure, which is why we're looking at the district scale approach. So we've completed a district scale stormwater system between some of the initial developments. There's 4 projects that are all private independent developers, and they're all sharing a stormwater system. They legally own it together. It collects the stormwater off of their properties, it treats it, and it conveys it underground to a kind of it's a giant bioswale or a rain garden essentially, and it stores the water, it treats it to a higher standard than would have happened otherwise. And now they own that water. It's a resource that's available for them to irrigate back on their properties or to sell to an industrial user. And everyone kind of saw the opportunity from private developers to the watershed organization, which is a kind of government agency here, that they could all work together to achieve bigger and better outcomes and still meet their missions or the task at hand. And that's the kind of model that we're really kind of using to exemplify how we want to try to do that with streets and energy and parks and green space. We're looking at building a green street on that same area where lots of new developments are happening, and about 2,000 units of new affordable senior and market rate housing. And there's really barely any street there. So we're looking at rebuilding that street to be kind of the new green front yard for that community, and that it isn't just a roadway, which is what the city would have given us if we needed a street, but we're trying to layer on top of that and make it a really rich, dynamic, social, active space that can be a walkable destination to the light rail. It can be a place that people meet and engage. And we're looking at a district energy system similar to the water, but pulling the heat out of the sanitary sewer system that runs through the district, and like a geothermal system, using that to heat and cool some of the projects that are in the area.
Yeah, so I want to point out, if anybody has any questions about any of these projects, if anyone listening out there, feel free to type your question into the Q&A box, and we'll take them. So James, I want to ask you, you're an outsider looking in. What do you think is particularly innovative about Stephen's project?
Well, like the History Center, there's a lot to love about Towerside. It is a truly unique and very complex, multifaceted project, like Stephen just explained. Stephen, I love the green forestry concept. It feels good and makes a lot of sense, at the pedestrian level to have right outside the doors of the future housing. And I love the stormwater management that was done on site, one of the early steps that was taken. I think if that could be done everywhere, that would be absolutely fantastic. But I got to be honest, the thing that I love the most is actually the district energy system, like the recovery of energy, the stable heat that is contained in the sewer system to heat and cool, like a heat pump would for all of these facilities. Now, do I remember right that it's 80 degrees or so down there year round?
More or less, something like that, yeah.
Something like that. So it's like summer all the time in the sewer.
Yeah. In the sewer, right?
In the sewer. So
not in Minnesota, in the sewer.
Exactly, because right now.
Let's get clear here.
Exactly. So, that's a remarkable, innovative step to take. And I know it's not the first time that it's been done, but it is rare for sure. And it's capitalizing on a real opportunity of the need for an infrastructure that did not exist prior. I think it's also very interesting, as much as I love that piece of your project, 100 years ago in Laverne, the old Main Street commercial district had a district heating system. which was truly innovative for its time. The power plant was at one end on the eastern side of Main Street, and the heat that was created from the power plant was used to create steam that was piped down Main Street to heat all the buildings in the commercial district of town. So that was truly innovative for its day. The system has become antiquated and was abandoned a few decades ago. But it's like the wheel of time has come full circle, and all of a sudden you're doing this new district, innovative district approach to energy use and reuse, really. We were doing that 100 years ago in a different capacity right in Laverne. So it's like we're all so similar in so many ways.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, well, so people came here to hear about some barns being raised, right? And and we're going to get into that topic right now and really dive deep into now that you know the projects, what can we learn about these projects and their approach that we can apply to other efforts that we might be working on. And, Stephen, I think one of the things that's most innovative about your project is not just the tech, but the coordination that needs to happen between the property owners in order to do that. Because, district scale energy is a really smart idea. It makes a lot more sense to build that system out at that scale, but it doesn't happen as often as it could because it, again, cuts across property lines, right? So let's shift gears to talking about that, right? To having a collective effort to build something that goes beyond just your private interest. Is that how you two think about this idea of the 21st century barn raising when it comes to your projects? Yeah, help us understand why you entitled your case studies according to this theme, and how you came to find this theme in the work that you were doing, and why you think it's so different than what else is going on out there.
I think the first piece that it came out in was how we both found that we were working with so many partners and kind of unlikely partners on these projects, and that system for just operationalizing, achieving the projects, coordinating them was necessary. But then there's the new unique opportunities that those partnerships were able to make possible and made the projects even better than they would have been on their own. And I think, again, they're totally different scales, but how in Towerside, it's getting people to think beyond their project and think beyond the box of what they normally would have in their wheelhouse, and having other disciplines and other ideas around and helping them change their perspective, change how they think about things, and change their projects or react to them, and or participate in someone else's project that they otherwise wouldn't have. And it's this kind of give and take of, in Minnesota and other Midwestern states across the country, barn raising was a critical economic practice that people came together to build a barn for a single family, a business, and they all recognized the need for them to pitch in to do that, because it was a pay it forward, a pay it back in the economy, and that it would come back to them when they needed their barn fixed or raised, whatever it was. And so there is this project component to it, and there's also then the social experience of those different partners, those different people, those different families coming together to do the work, and that even creates this set of relationships and shared trust and experience working together, working on a project together, which most of these kinds of groups don't have that shared history. And then that creates an opportunity for resilience. It creates opportunities for whether it's a barn or a natural disaster or the need to innovate on your technology because energy is running out. I think that's where we started in, and we were always at 30,000 feet with it.
Always. Happy to be there most of the time. But let me pick up on this. The phrase fair trade comes to mind just now. Fair trade in terms of building community, like how you build community together in exchanging the resources that you bring to a project or a process. This is historically the way all communities functioned and still do in different ways today. But what happened in the History Center project, which was interesting, there was always this very intense concern about the cost, because at some level it was just impractical. It was not feasible. You could not just keep throwing money at this project because the money wouldn't be there. So how to be truly economical in the approach, and where could we find economical trade-offs? And there was a willingness to compromise and things like that. But there was also this growing recognition on my part and many others, as we stepped deeper and deeper into the process, that the local component was absolutely critical. The local services, the local contractors, the local shops. There was a lot of opportunity right there in Laverne. And while we could have pulled from our own network of providers that are anywhere from 60 to 160 miles away, there was absolutely no need to do that. And in fact, we got better value from the local resources because they knew about the project. They recognized the value. They appreciated the project. They appreciated the historical society. And numerous times they gave very good bids to the project, so the cost was reasonable. And it just helps, it snowballed again. I mean, it just helped support the project and make it go even further. In the end, the collaborative design build process that we all engaged in accomplished quite a bit more than we initially thought it would. And they were able to build out the entire project, renovating all 12,000 square feet. And we're not sure if they were going to be able to do that in the beginning, but it was with the help of so many people and their responsible approach that made that possible.
Yeah, Stephen, I mean, tell us about, you talked about working with a lot of these partners. Tell us about a partnership that came together that seemed unlikely and how it happened.
We have a couple of good examples. And I think one that I really like to use is for the Green Forest Street project. It depends on how you wanted to see it. Developers saw that they needed a road. They needed a street for people to drive on and for people to walk on sidewalks. The community wanted a green street. They wanted to demonstrate what a 21st century green street would look like if they were going to be building that in their neighborhood, in their community. And that was even kind of one connection and collaboration where the developers were trying to respond to resident interests and community ideas that were in all these half dozen plans and drawings. And as the project progressed, it brought in more people. It brought in more institutions and perspectives, whether it's more landowners and groups like Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is the Center for Prevention here in Minnesota. They reallocate tobacco settlement dollars to treat and address preventable causes of death, which is the biggest causes of death in Minnesota. And one of the biggest ways to do that is walkability, creating a walkable community. And so they invested several $100,000s in the design of the street to make sure that it could, from start to finish, be as attractive, as walkable, as connected as possible. And that achieved their mission and vision. It enabled the community to do what they wanted, and it gave the developers something that they would never have otherwise gotten. And it's a win-win-win for everyone. And the product and the process that we went through to do that is better kind of as a result of that mixing. The stormwater example is another one where the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, it's their mission to manage the watershed and to do any kind of intervene in new projects or come up to new developments and try to find ways to help them manage their stormwater in the best way possible. And seeing the large scale of work that was going to happen in this area, kind of over 70 contiguous acres of brownfield land, that they could think about it all at once and not just parcel by parcel. And we did this one first phase with the first 4 property owners. And this new little green space that got created as a result is this little stormwater park that we call it. And it provides a very functional operation. The developers and the property owners now have their stormwater taken care of. They didn't have to worry about it in the design. The watershed actually worked with Towerside to take care of the whole project and just turnkey it to the developers. But now we have this public space that was in this no man's land otherwise. And it's a way for people to learn about the watershed. Kids are coming from the local school to explore it and do bio blitzes and learn about the world they live in and how these systems work. And that kind of starts hitting at more of the community vision and the Towerside vision about that this whole place can be a living laboratory for how we build for the 21st century. And now that we have that demonstration project kind of done, and it was a real project, and now other developers are approaching the watershed in this district and saying, well, how do we connect to that? How do we scale it up on our project? And they're putting in money in advance to do the studies and do the planning, and because they see the power and the potential of what they can get out of it. And so it's a little bit snowballing at a slightly different scale than the History Center in Laverne, but still bringing different people to the table and getting them to work across lines.
Are we still on the topic of unlikely partnerships?
Yeah, well, I actually kind of want to pose a question to the two of you on this topic, which is, that sounds so like happy, it's like I just feel like there's like bunnies hopping and like confetti falling from the sky. So why, it just sounds so great, Stephen. So how come not every community development project across the country is operating this way? Yeah, why isn't this happening more?
Yeah.
And we like to portray it as bunnies hopping all the time, but when you get so many different people in a room together that are from different disciplines and different silos and different perspectives on the world, and they think 30,000 feet, and some are like on the ground, they just want to build some infrastructure. They're speaking different languages sometimes. Like there's a level of translation that needs to happen, and these groups need to kind of build a culture of meeting each other where they each are and recognizing the other people's perspectives and compromising to meet them. And that isn't always an easy bunny hopping process. It takes lots of time and energy and patience. It sometimes doesn't work. And I think one of the reasons it's happening here is the really unique location that Towerside is in. There's just really there's a huge amount of opportunity to impact the community and to impact the economy here, that there is this kind of forum, which is Towerside, that helps connect everyone and so do some of that translation, helps coordinate some of the projects, get everyone together. And not everyone has that kind of middle ground mediator to support that. Mm. There was another part of your question.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm wondering, well, why, so it sounds like, and we've talked about this a little bit, that the way you approach these projects is not business as usual, and for the most part in real estate development and or community development, right? Mm-hmm. So,
agreed.
Yeah, but chatting with the two of you, I get the sense that there's this idea that there's something that's been lost along the way, that these projects are actually recovering. So do you think that this is a new approach? Do you think this is an approach that's being recovered? Do you think that there are ways to integrate it into so that it's not just, a special project here or there? Do you think this could become a more widespread approach to building projects? And what would have to happen in order for that to be accomplished?
That's one of the pieces of the Towerside vision, is to kind of be a replicable model for how communities can redevelop and grow in the 21st century, to meet their infrastructure needs, to meet their job growth and housing needs. I think we need to figure out more of how our sustainable plan is going to work, and just sustainability as an organization. And we want to try to share that with networks and with communities and bring people here. And I think that's part of why we work with so many partners, is so that it can kind of disseminate and that people can be as involved as they want to be. And even today I was talking with someone and it was like, well, you tell us what you want it to be. And mm-hmm. It's open to them to bring that idea to the Innovation District. And the idea here is bring what is it you've always wanted to do and haven't been able to, and let's try to figure out how to make that happen. And so it's kind of like a culture of how we work and how we want to work with city agencies, nonprofits, developers, community groups. And I think there's that level of openness and big vision that not everyone always has. There's sometimes just brass tacks, and there's developers who own land and they build a project because that's what their discipline does and that's what they know how to do. And so the more we can create a culture of communities asking for more, knowing how to ask for more, how to work with developers to engage and create community benefit agreements or zoning exchanges. They can go higher if they build a grocery store because they're in a food desert. And the more developers and landowners and institutions see the opportunity to collaborate and work beyond just the box of their property lines, it scales up the scope of what the project's impact could be. And that's where, real estate pro forma and nonprofit vision can meet and come together. And so I think it's, again, a practice and a culture. And I think that's a little bit why we also stuck with the barn raising metaphor, was that it's kind of how that worked.
It's a choice.
Absolutely.
It's a decision to work this way. I think 100 plus years ago, actual barn raising was a necessity. You had to. It was the only way you were going to survive if you were going to get all the work done that needed to be done and actually build that barn that you really did need to survive through the winter, because you needed shelter for your food, for your animals, and those things. So, I mean, there's a very rooted historic reason for barn raising and why it happened. Today, we have a lot of options to work with and choose from, not necessarily flush with funds, but there are different things that you can choose to do. How do you choose to work? It's an important question to answer. This deep community work that Stephen and I are talking about is impactful. There are definite benefits. There are community building dimensions to it. It's exciting. It's energetic. Not everybody agrees all the time. It can get, bunny hopping can be messy. I love that phrase, by the way. I'm going to keep that one. It's bunny hopping, but I think it is it's a choice and a decision to work this way. I mean, we could say that regulation could lighten, maybe provide more opportunity for different approaches than business as usual, but that's not really the true answer. We could ask for more resources, but we know that they're only lessening, not increasing. So really, it's why do we choose to do this alternative approach, which is actually very historically relevant. And I think there's something of the past and the viability from our past relating to our future in terms of working this in this deep community capacity. It is very relevant and very possible today, in spite of the complexities that we deal with in all communities, especially large urban ones like Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the rules and regulations that you confront. You can choose to approach them in a different fashion and go deeper with community work. And with that community work, and this, one of our common threads, Stephen and I, we've talked a lot about, one of our common threads is that community connection, that people have the choice, they're engaged, the questions are being asked to them. Stephen, you probably have a response to this. Have you ever seen those times when you go ask that question to that community member about a topic, something that they have interest in, and they honestly don't know what to say because they've never been asked the question of their opinion?
Absolutely. I think we've evolved since times of barn raising, and just generally that communities accept what they're given oftentimes, and they don't have a culture or an understanding of how they can ask for more, but that they should ask for something else, and right, how they participate in that process. And I think that's kind of what's really interesting about a history center or an innovation district. It kind of opens up that opportunity, enables them, and that absolutely is a choice. And I think it's interesting in the world we face today that it's also maybe an imperative to work this way. And maybe the kind of this new economy that we're confronting opens up that opportunity for people to actually spend the time and take the process to, leverage technology and leverage, new ways of doing things to actually have more human contact and think about more human impact in the work.
Yeah, everywhere, no matter how large or small. There was a conversation just occurred here in the office yesterday on this basic topic. And the phrase, which we've all heard before, I remember it being coined maybe in a movie from the 1990s. If you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
if you build, that's business as usual. That's development as usual in America today.
Yep.
I mean, good and bad, that's the way it is most of the time. But what we're saying is, it's not if you build it, they will come. It's if you engage them, they will support it. They will be involved. They will deliver on some portion of their involvement, and they will philosophically own it, if not have some sort of financial stake in it. And that projects are made more sustainable and more impactful by touching and engaging the people directly around them that actually know it and are associated with it. Whether they physically live in that building or not, or use that park, they had a stake in how it was developed. Thankfully, cities do some of this. I mean, there's interest in this out there. What Stephen and I are talking about is taking it to a different level. I mean, Stephen, you could have done Towerside without the input from the two adjacent neighborhoods.
We could have attempted it, yeah.
You could have attempted it. It would have become its own thing. It would have been Towerside that was dreamed up by people who don't know the location, don't really live there. It would have been a development. And
absolutely.
The direction you're taking it's far more than a development. It involves many pieces from lots of places around Towerside itself, which makes it more sustainable.
I agree. I think it's about creating a place more than just a collection of real estate deals that would look like an anonymous world of 6-story buildings. And it absolutely is about that. This process is what creates the resilience in the work. And I think that is innovative. Getting people to see that as innovation isn't always easy in the bunny hopping or cat herding. Just my time doing.
Careful.
We're picking out the animals that are going to be in the barn.
Bunnies and cats. It's funny. It's funny.
No, keep going, Stephen. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, I mean, you said, and I worked on another project. It wasn't Towerside, but the community participated. They worked with an engagement artist, and they created these mosaics for a public space. And they were engaged in that process. They helped make the actual signature element of this site. And as the development now is happening around it, the community feels ownership over the site. They feel ownership over the place. They feel responsible for it. They take care of it. They are aware of the work more of what's happening. They have relationships and contacts with us and the developers. And so they can say like, hey, are you going to make sure that we still can get here? Or when's the next concert going to be? Or how do we make sure we can do this or that? And those seem maybe trivial to developers who just want to have a performer that works. But that's where the resilience comes out, when if a project hits a snag, the community can then be a new resource that they otherwise wouldn't have had to advocate, to go to their electeds and make sure that it can happen, because everyone sees the shared impact of what could be. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a totally different project to do that. I think it sometimes is just changing the perspective of how you see the project and how you talk about it. And that's what we did with Green Forest Street. I mean, depending on who we're talking to, it's a roadway. For some people, it's a complete street, and you're hitting everyone's buttons, and it's still the same project, but everyone's kind of adding their little piece to the pie.
Community as a resource is a really true point. There's sometimes a tendency in maybe conventional settings to see community as an obstacle or a roadblock, potentially a pitfall. And we're saying exactly the opposite. Like, once you get the community involved, you actually have a more sustainable type of project. The community of Laverne that rallied around the History Center project is truly remarkable, and it to me speaks of small town community and how those communities can thrive and do continue to thrive today in the 21st century. The support for it was strong, and financially they raised far more money than they expected, just out of their own efforts. Now, they got very creative. It wasn't just community donations. While there was quite a bit, they engaged the grant programs that I think I touched on before. There's one through the Department of Employment and Economic Development called Small Cities, which was active in Laverne. That was resourceful. They got resourceful with a local facade improvement program that the city was providing to the Main Street district. They figured out how to utilize that. beyond the volunteers, the local business and philanthropist support, there was a local casino that gave a community grant that they utilized. The football team used, like, they provided muscle power to move in the 2,934 nutcrackers into the museum when it was done. So it's like the community was completely involved in one place or another in this entire project. And the financial dimension of it, they raised almost the entire amount of the construction cost. And this is just a snapshot of what a healthy, small community really is.
That's amazing.
And I'm not going to define that as a healthy, small rural community, because I believe urban neighborhoods can be and do the exact same thing. Laverne has put forth an example, a great example of how to do that. But it's an example that we can all learn from. And with that, there comes this attitude, this approach that we will decide to work this way. We're not going to get bogged down in the disagreements, which do come and go, but we're going to keep our eye on the goal and really work together to make it happen. It was a beautiful thing. I'm not trying to say it was all bunnies, because, you know, there were some messy parts in there where we had to get over maybe blocks in the road or cracks in the road, but it really did work out well. And I continue to feel like it's the community in Laverne and the Historical Society that is their relationship that truly made it happen. We were just instrumental in the physical construction and design dimension, but without them doing everything I just said, not possible. So it was a team effort, start to finish.
So James, you're continuing on with your organization, and you're going to be working with other nonprofits. You're going to be working on other real estate efforts. So how are you taking what you learned through the Rock County Historical Center project and applying it to how you're going to be doing this work with other nonprofits and on other real estate efforts in the future?
Good question. It's a project. The History Center is truly unique. It's a project we reflect on periodically. And there's another opportunity similar to it, potentially in Laverne, with a similar organization, the local Historical Society, possibly collaboration with the Art Center there to renovate an old armory building, which is an historic property, but very underutilized right now. What could be done there, and how could we make that feasible? So there's always that cost expense concern around these types of projects. But in another location, we've had recent conversations with a local Catholic convent, an order of nuns that are looking at their property that they own and saying, you know, there's opportunities here with this land to serve the community. What can be done with it? So, you know, we're having the conversations about that in terms of development, but through the deep work of community engagement in Laverne and some other work we've been doing in small towns with an initiative called Partnership Art, and connecting with community members on every possible level. Like, we've been actively engaged in this community building approach to development. I think we can plug in ways that are unique to the traditional approach, which traditional community development in our experience involves the city council and important members of the community that need and always will have a voice, but sometimes misses other people. So we're looking at it more comprehensively, more holistically now, and I think the reality of that has come into focus through projects like the History Center and this other community work that we've been doing for a couple of years now in partnership with an Art Place grant. So it's changing how we approach community development and community planning. That's where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, so Stephen, I wanna ask you, you know, I'm struck by how you talked about the role of Towerside as being this mediator that makes those connections and processes happen, and how you also talked about it as living somewhere in that intersection between real estate development and then nonprofit mission-based focus. So, and you know, it's not your typical organizational structure. So, what do you think is unique about that structure of Towerside and the eco district what can it accomplish that you don't think is being accomplished as easily or as regularly in other organizational structures?
And I think one of the reasons Towerside was formed, and it's kind of, it just incorporated this year as an actual entity and is still operating as a public-private partnership, that everyone that was involved saw the opportunity, but they recognized that it was beyond the capacity of any one organization, and they needed something that they could all kind of grow and elevate, that could advocate for what everyone else needed. It helps everyone see beyond what they normally would do. And that's the kind of the core nature of it being a partnership, is that we're all in it here together. And so it can't just be about one person or one project, but the impact to the whole system, and how we have to think about and operate in systems and set ourselves up for growing and making sure that we're not cutting off new opportunities or excluding potential partners, and growing our partnership and bringing in more people and new perspectives. And I think that's something that we need to do this year, is have more arts organizations. There's a strong, huge arts community here in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and they've been somewhat involved, but there's so many opportunities that we could use that could be almost at the scale of the History Center, that could bring in community ownership and connect people to this work. It's a little bit more up in the atmosphere than on the ground grassroots work that James has. There's so many electeds and staff and organizations involved. There's both cities and both counties, because it crosses both. There's lots of bureaucracy layers, and building those community relationships is another kind of big challenge. And getting anyone to relate to infrastructure and connecting it back to their everyday life and why it's important is hard to do. And even connecting this infrastructure to the giant equity goals and inequity challenges that Minneapolis and St. Paul has. Talking about streets doesn't seemingly necessarily connect to that, but if you use the district thinking approach and model this partnership, you really can connect it to walkability, which is about health outcomes, which disproportionately affect people of color and from low income communities. And so again, it's about how we change the perspective of how we talk about the project. If it was left up to anyone or just the developers who could have just been here doing their own work, they would be speaking about it and only presenting it in one way. And that's the kind of the mediator, facilitator approaches we get to take all the different perspectives, kind of curate the project, and then share it back and make sure that it's what the community wants and what it really needs. And if it isn't, that the system can change to respond to that. I think that's the kind of exciting power of it.
Yeah. Well, so if anyone who's listening has questions, there's a Q&A box, so just type them in. I think we can take probably a question or two. And in the meantime, James and Stephen, you're working in such different contexts, right? It's so urban and so rural, but you're talking about a shared process. So if there is someone out there today who's listening who is interested in integrating that, the bunnies approach, right? Like the complex, community engaged, who wants to make that choice to do a project this way, what do you suggest is their first step?
Well, first step, I guess just a couple points. One is it's a choice. We've already mentioned that. You can choose to step into that space yourself if you want to. If you're really interested in kind of learning how to do this, you can be creative in your own way to step into that space. And I would recommend, if you choose to do that, just be open and honest about that this is a new experience for you, that this is a new approach. You don't have every answer to a process that is new to you, but be genuine in that approach and willing to listen. That's a great place to begin. If you're uncomfortable stepping into that space yourself, would really like some more expertise that you feel like you don't have at the moment, there are lots of resources around you that you probably don't realize at the moment that could be accessed. So local arts groups are often instrumental in engaging communities in unique ways that lead to insights that you would never gain on your own. Other nonprofits are actively involved in community engagement. You can learn a lot through them. So there's a potential to partner. And I've never known a nonprofit not to be at least interested in discussing an opportunity that might be new and different for the type of work that they're inclined to do. So there's always an opportunity to find a new resource, I think, and a space to work together.
Yeah, Stephen, I want to ask you a related question that just came in. So do you have advice for others on how to conceive and design an inclusive process that can lead to these kinds of projects or opportunities? Right? How would you put, yeah.
Sure. I think it's about making sure that, when we're talking about infrastructure, big scale projects, it's easy to just talk to the engineers and the experts and the consultants and then make the project happen, because that's the logical linear progression. But there's steps far before that project kind of even comes to conception of engaging in the community. And you don't necessarily have to engage, and this would be my advice as well, to that other question. You don't have to engage around a specific project to start. I think you can just put some sweat equity in and identify something and say, hey, let's do a cleanup day. Let's re-envision the park, or let's create this participatory public art project. And those build the relationships. It helps create trust across different communities, different professions, and that can then be leveraged into these projects. And I think that's the kind of power of creative community engagement that not everyone always taps into or sees. And sometimes you don't have the time for it, but you can always be listening. You can always make sure that people very clearly can see where and how they can engage and what their engagement is going to do to the project. It's easy to go to a zoning meeting and present it and call it community engagement, check your box, but that's not really what we're talking about, and doesn't actually build community. It doesn't create agency or capacity for people to impact their built environment in a really compelling way, I would say. And so identifying the projects that really can benefit from community engagement. District energy, a really hard project to benefit from something like that. Building a new park, absolutely critical to make sure that any and every voice possible can be involved in that. And so spending as much time as possible with it and really investing in that process.
So it sounds like you're saying, on one hand, maybe just get started doing something that invites people to bring their human selves. And that sounds like where arts and culture can actually be really, really helpful in doing that. And maybe don't totally overthink it. And on the other hand, there also comes a point in the process where you want to think about how you're engaging people, what you want, what they can actually weigh in on, and what the appropriate places for them to comment on are.
And I think engagement isn't over after that. Like, it's still a relationship that you have with these people. Now it isn't just a transactional, right. It's more than that. And so you can keep that going with more. Right. It's not just,
the creative
box to check.
The creative engagement, which I understand Stephen's speaking about, it's really useful in building consensus as much as you can in a community process, and building momentum, which creates the buy-in and the investment that we've been talking about for this last hour in our community work.
Yeah, I think that's a great succinct way to pull that together. So I want to say again, thank you to both James and Stephen for being here. Thank you to everybody who came to listen. Again, here is that link to the case studies if you want to learn more and see how you can apply the lessons of these projects to your own project or effort. And if you're interested in reaching out to Stephen or James and finding out more about their work, you can find out more about them on their website, so the Towerside website or the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership website, which you can see on the screen. And if you're interested in finding out more about the Rose Fellowship Program, again, visit enterprisecommunity.org. So thanks again, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Stephen and James.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. Bye.
Bye.